Okay, well, welcome everybody. Um, this is I wasn't going to do a podcast as part of my social media thing. Um, I mean, I do and I don't, but I want to do one. But then I had someone reach out to me and say, "Hey, I have some questions, and something tells me that I just got to reach out to Matt Butler." And it keeps coming up. And so he reached out, and I said, well, I think the easiest way for me to answer these questions is in a conversation. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to have a conversation, I could use the content, to be honest with you. So I asked him if he would come on, um, and so that we could kind of have a conversation around shamanic topics. But here's the twist. And he's just going to go by the name Mo. So we're just going to use Mo. But Mo is still in the military, and if we start touching on topics about plant medicine and whatnot, that can be problematic. So Mo is going to stay off camera, but I'm going to pause here in just a minute and allow Mo to kind of just maybe tell his version of the story about how we wound up here. And then we're just going to jump in and see what happens. Like literally, we've had a couple exchanges on text message, and no planning or thought has gone into this. So that's usually how the best things turn out, right? So, all right, Mo, go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and why we're having this conversation, maybe.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you remember this. I met you. It was in between 2018 and 23. And so, so I guess I'll go ahead and give a little bit of my backstory. I
Sure.
was in the Marines from 2013 to 18. I got out, immediately went into law enforcement for about 4 years. Started doing school, used my GI Bill. And in that time, I had, I keep up with all the VA stuff and all, just stuff that's good for other veterans. And I had come across this article because I was struggling with depression at the time, and it was talking about psychedelics helping with that. And so down into the deep dive I went with that, and liking Facebook groups and things of that nature. And that was actually where I met you,
Yep.
and you kind of helped me into that, and so we'll touch on that here in a little bit. But 2023, I got out of school. Uh, Jobs where I was at weren't that great. So I said, well, I got this degree that I can't use. I know the military is great, for benefits with the family. Let's give it another go. And that's where I'm at now. I got roughly till May, and I'll be getting out.
Nice. Well, congratulations on that. Um, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks for, being willing to share part of your story, and, be vulnerable. Um, so with that, um, like I said, we're just gonna have a conversation about some things that have been coming up for you, and I guess some heavier, weightier matters, kind of. So, because I really do feel like it's gonna be easier for us to talk about these things um conversationally. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so with that, just dive in, man. Like hit me with some questions, and actually let me preface this. I'm glad I remembered this. I want I do get into these conversations frequently, and and even like when people come to ceremony with us, like sometimes like that's part of people's integration process is that they need to get a little bit they need to have somebody maybe at hold space for them while they talk about like what their experience is. Like a lot of times it's people coming out of the matrix, right? And that's a part of it. It's not everybody's experience, but it's certainly part of most people's experience. And so we as a staff end up, like helping people integrate into their experience. But what's important to know, both as somebody who may or may not do psychedelics, or may not be holding facility, or even part of this experience right now that we're in, is that I am adamantly adamant about, I mean, that sounds stupid, adamantly adamant. I'm adamant. I'm adamant about the fact that this is just opinion. Okay. Like
Mhm.
I'm nobody's guru. Nobody like this is, I'm not an expert. I do believe that I've retained knowledge from past lives and have some shamanic wisdom and perspectives. Yes, but at the end of the day, what's most important is that you chew on this yourself and you go through the process of coming to understand what you believe is right in your view of the world and the universe. So um, both I give that for you, Mo, but I also give that for anybody who might hear this. I by
Absolutely.
by no means am I saying like this is the path and I'm right 100% or anything like that. Okay,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we all got to make our own decisions and what we personally feel is best, for
true,
us and the ones around us.
absolutely. So first question or first topic.
Well, so I kind of tried to write everything down so I wouldn't just be all over the place. Try to keep it organized.
Yep.
uh, I guess first thing I'll talk about is, whenever I started using, it was actually mushrooms for my depression. Uh, I started off, I did I guess a smaller dose. It was like 3 grams dried. Just ate them, and it was a good experience. That was actually the first time I did it. Me and my wife did it together, and it was just amazing that me and her got to share that together. And from there, I kind of started doing the micro dosing, to try to help me just every day, and I worked up the courage, I guess you should say, to do a bigger dose. I did about 6 grams in a tea, and that was an experience. I did, it was a lot of healing that came out of that for me. My wife was there. She was there in case I needed her, but it was really a good experience. And I worked through a lot of issues that I had been holding on to. And, from there, I still was doing the microdosing. And actually, this is one of the things, looking back at it, it's funny, but it was not funny at the time. I had a friend of mine and my wife was out of town, and we decided, hey, we're gonna do some of these, just have a good time. And that was where I actually learned the respect, to treat it. It's medicine. It's what it is. It's not something you just do to have a good time, and that was a learning experience because it was not a pleasant experience. But I got through it, and it still helped me to grow. And one of the biggest things that I got out of that was I found myself thinking about why I believed the things I believed. I started thinking for myself for the first time. And that is what really, I guess, drove me off the deep end. Just, I was questioning everything,
Mhm.
religion, my political views, all of it. And that kind of brings me into my little next topic is, so I realized that I was raised Southern Baptist, and I had, whenever I was right out of high school, I thought I wanted to go, seminary school, the preacher route, all of that. And the more I had read the Bible at that time, the more I questioned things. And then I would go to the preacher and hey, I have questions. It's like, Just don't question it. You don't have enough faith. You know what they say.
Yep, I do.
And I was like, okay, that's weird. I can ask questions, but I never dug any deeper into it. Now that I'm actually asking these questions to myself, I'm like, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Things don't click like that. I feel like they should click. And ultimately, I walked away from organized religion altogether. And I'm kind of at a place where I look at multiple religions and I grab what I think is useful. I've here lately I've been doing a lot of study in Buddhism and pulling things from Buddhism
Hmm.
that have actually been really beneficial for me and helping me heal with, again, my own personal stuff that I still struggle with. But also with that, it was the big question of, well, what happens after, all of this? What happens after I die? There's that big question, the heaven and the hell. And it was really struggling with that for quite a while. Well, then I was like, you know what? I know how I'm gonna solve this. I'm just gonna look and I'm gonna watch all these videos of people who died and came back. And we'll try to make an informed decision based off of that. And I hate to use the word down the rabbit hole, but that's the one I like to use these days. So down
Yeah,
the rabbit hole I went.
sure.
And it was a very common theme of not a heaven or a hell, but this this oneness, with with family members and other people that you truly love, and of these other souls. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me. That makes a lot more sense than zombie Sky Daddy killing himself to save me from himself.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at now, and I find a lot of peace in that. But then, when you going down rabbit holes, you find other rabbit holes. And then the one that I'm kind of working through now is, you hear about the soul traps. Oh, you're just gonna always reincarnate back to Earth. I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I'm tired of being here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to come back. And so that's where I'm at with that area.
Okay. You want me to jump in there?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, anytime you want to jump in, just hop right on in.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think that this format's going to serve us well, where we just kind of keep the conversation going.
Hmm.
So first of all, just for anybody who's maybe the uninitiated, I do want to back up and talk about some of your doses. 3 grams. I think 3 grams is a pretty good good place to start. For me, and these numbers are arbitrary, but most people will like tend to agree. But I think that depending on who it is, anything under a gram is kind of considered a microdose. Anything under a
Hmm.
half a gram is definitely a microdose. In that 1 to 3 range, that's kind of what I call like the Pink Floyd concert light show dosage, like maybe a concert dose, depending on your metabolism. 6 gram, definitely ceremonial. They consider 5 grams a hero dose. That's what I would call and hero. Like, let's talk about that real quick. They're borrowing the name hero's dose from literature. So if
Hmm.
you look at all major literature, the hero's journey is, our hero is born, our hero then, is somehow exiled. Our hero must conquer these villains, which is really just a metaphor for conquering his own demons, returns the victor and the hero. Okay. Star Wars classic, right? Luke was exiled, being raised by his aunt and his uncle, um, you know, goes on to face his demons and villains and returns the hero. So that's the hero's dose because when we go into psychedelic space, when we go into these different realms on a hero's journey, that's exactly what we're doing. We're being exiled, sometimes exiled from our reality, from this realm, from our bodies, from our judgments, facing our demons, coming home the hero. So good work for you there, and having the courage to do that with your wife. I love that you did it with your wife. So much connectedness when we have these beautiful these journeys. The other one, I really appreciate what you said too about the idea that like it taught you how much, to really respect the medicine and how important it is that we
Yes,
respect it. Yeah. Like I do find value in, the idea that there's probably, hundreds of people partaking in mushrooms all across the country and universities and things like that, and they're probably not doing it in the most respectful manner or with trip sitters and facilitators and shamans. And to a degree that's okay too, because it's still having an effect and it's still waking people up to the realities to a degree. But by like the rule is like that, those are exceptions to the rule. The rule should always be that you work with somebody, that you should have a trip sitter. I will occasionally break that rule and do a ceremony by myself up in the woods, but I've got hundreds of journeys under my belt, and so I don't know, I mean, it's kind of different for everybody, but by and large, the rule should be you should have a trip sitter. Should have somebody there with experience. Let's put that out there, right, to begin with.
absolutely. And that's kind of it's funny you mentioned that. So, uh, I told you I had my buddy there with me. Well, he just up and leaves. Didn't say nothing. I went inside. I was like, hey, because I have a trouble. They make my stomach hurt really bad, and so I was like, I need to go. Just I need to lay down for 5 minutes, let this nausea pass, and I'll be right back out. And I come out, and dude is gone. I mean, and I call him, and he ain't answering. Turns out, like, because he lived like 15 minutes up the road, he just went home.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
that's when it started to get. That's when it started to get really bad. Is
Yeah.
whenever he left and I was there alone, I was like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. Great points. When we journey, we actually have a box that we call the Trevor box, and that's another story for another day. But we lock all the keys and all the phones in the Trevor box. Um, you know, but yeah. Um, I like that you brought up the near-death experiences too, because what a lot of people don't understand is that in many ways, psychedelic experiences closely mirror near-death experiences. And
Yes.
right, and it's for all the reasons. Well, a couple reasons. And I mean, psilocybin works on a different molecule than, like, say, acacia or ayahuasca, which is the active ingredient is DMT,
Mm-hmm.
dimethyltryptamine. But in DMT, there's two times, like, we all have it in our own bodies. Like, you have it in your body right now, I have it in my body right now.
Yep.
Like, we can be trained to release it. Now, two times that you will release it, no matter what, is when you're born and when you die. So it's not just coincidental or metaphorical or rhetorical that they're kind of like a near-death experience. It's actually very, very identical to a near-death experience. It's just that you're not suffering a traumatic experience that may or may not cause you to die.
And maybe you can help me out with this. I can't remember the guy's name, but his theory was that that was the gateway to leave, for your soul to enter and leave the body, and that was his theory on why uh, we produce it when we're born and when we die.
Hmm. Yeah, that was Terrence McKenna.
Was it okay? Yeah,
Yeah. And so, yeah, actually, that's 100% it. Like,
and so it makes sense.
yeah, we start to, like, if you're with your grandparent and they're starting to pass, they're probably experiencing DMT. In fact, like when you do a vision quest, you may go 3 or 4 days without food or water. Like 3 days without water, you're starting to knock on death's door. And
Hmm.
so your body is going to release DMT, therefore the vision. Same with, like people who are getting ready to die. If it isn't something that's, sudden and traumatic, if it's from an illness or old age or things like that, their appetites turn off, their thirst turns off, and the body begins to shut down. Same process. So you're going to release that DMT, and so yeah, DMT is a big part of the dying process and the birthing process. Yeah. So I also love that you brought up, the Buddhist uh, theology. I tend to not classify Buddhism as a religion per se. I and I could be completely wrong. I'm a real inexperienced and let me classify this for you and everybody else as well, okay? Like my journey started being raised in the Mormon church. Which is a whole nother funny story. In fact, when I did my second psych eval for selection onto active duty, the therapist said, "Do you want, it was a one-on-one this time." And he said, "Hey, I have some time. I'd be happy to share your results and give you an opportunity to discuss those with you." And I said, "Sure." And he said, and he says, "Well, the first thing I note is that you're either an evangelical or a Mormon. Which one is it?" So, and I don't think that that's because we have shared beliefs. I think that that's because we have extremism in belief. So,
Yes.
yeah. So I have some similarities there. So I went from the Mormon faith to being excommunicated from the Mormon faith to being agnostic to then having a spiritual awakening. And originally I thought like, okay, like what really aligns with me, especially like in shamanic space, is pagan practice because pagan is so aligned with nature and that's where I'm at. So I really I felt that. But when I did my pilgrimage and I went back to some of my past life experiences and locations actually and walked in those places and felt that what really came forward for me through meditation, study, experiences was more animism. So from sort of a historical perspective, like animism was really man, and I'm talking about like, Homo sapiens. We have 250,000 years of history on this earth as Homo sapiens and that particular species of our evolutionary tree. But Homo sapiens, like when they first really started to have some sort of, um, relationship, and there's a raven flying right out my window right here. All right. But the really sort of first codified, and I even kind of struggle to call it a belief system, but was in animism. And that was simply the idea that we are equal with nature. Like
Hmm.
we're one with the tree, with the rock, with the waterfall, the lake, the clouds, the sky. We're the same. And early man understood our relationship with that. If you look over my shoulder right there, it's like the wheel of the year. And
Hmm.
that's a kind of our next evolution as mankind. We got a little more formal. We started to have like a better understanding of the cosmos and the planets. And, we identified eight major, like the four major, the solstices and the equinoxes, and then the times in between. So that gave us the eight major holidays. And
Yeah.
then, right. And so anyway, just kind of to give everybody some background, I identify now as animistic. Um, but I also weirdly would, if someone said, "Are you Christian?" I would say yes too, if that makes sense. Because not in a religious sense, but in the sense of a belief in Christ himself.
Hmm.
And not, again, not in the way that like religion taught me, but more in the sense that like I believe Christ to be an ascended master. I believe him to be a real historical figure. I believe him to have had an important message. Do I go to a Christian church? No. Do I do all the things like no, I still am deeply animistic, but um I find value in and I respect these different belief systems, whether they be Christianity or Buddhism. But I will say that of all the spiritual practices out there, whether it be Taoism, Buddhism, Christianity, uh, Hebrew, or excuse me, Jewish traditions, things like that. Of all of them, I personally believe Buddhism to be the cleanest form of worship that has suffered the least um you know like what's the word I'm looking for?
The least adulterated.
Embellishment. Yeah, perverted or
Yeah.
embellishment. Yeah. It seems to be the most beautifully sound, unadulterated version of spiritual worship that I can find, which really brings me a lot of satisfaction too.
That's exactly I mean, that's the best way I've heard it described. So, and it's for me, it's almost like it's teaching you just how to live a good, clean life, not only for you physically, but spiritually, you
Yeah,
know?
I was watching a program last night with the author, and I don't know his name. Off the top of my head, he wrote some books called A Course in Miracles. But he also wrote a book that is channeled, and I know that there's people here that aren't going to buy into the idea of, channeled messages, which is fine. We can explore that if we need to. But he channeled a message between Buddha and Christ where he shows that they were really best friends over a course of about 40 different lifetimes together, where they were both ascending, both learning, both teaching one another, working together, and then ultimately had their own lives and left their own legacy as their own independent ascended masters, which is a beautifully fascinating um, concept. I need to read the book. I haven't read it, but I can, there's another book I read that I recommend people look up. I think it's called Christ, an autobiography, also channeled this time by a woman, and it does go. I'm going to see if I can't pull it up here on my phone, but that one goes into the whole idea that Christ. We talk about there's 3 years, right? There's a gap in kind of his history before he comes back and starts his ministry, and what he channels through this woman who wrote this book is that let me see, finished books, but that yeah, right here, Jesus, let's see, dang it, I just want you to open up. No, okay. uh well, it's not letting me pull it up, but it says Jesus by Tina Louise Spalding. I think it's Jesus, an autobiography, Tina Louise Spalding. So anyway,
I'm writing
in
that
those
down 1 second.
yeah, yep. um and I'll pull it up again on my phone here, but essentially for those 3 years where he went um was, yeah, there it is. All right, let me pull it up here in images. I mean, I am like the worst social media podcaster out there, so this is what you got, folks.
Okay.
All right. But essentially for those 3 years, he went all the way to Tibet and China, and he studied with these Eastern masters in terms of how to manipulate. Not, no, that's the wrong word for it, and we can go down this rabbit hole too. But like how to transcend the physical realm, okay? Um, you know, Jesus, yes, being the Son of God, and but he understood how to use energy to transcend that physical realm. So when
Hmm.
he performed the miracles, when he turned water to wine, or fed the crowds, or raised people from the dead, healed people, walked on water, all that really was just his understanding of knowledge of how to manipulate and work with energy, if you will, is how
Yeah.
he describes it in that book. Yeah,
So I've actually done like a little bit of looking into that. I hadn't got too deep yet,
yeah,
but it's because I'm still trying to work through some of the what's the word I'm looking for?
How about religious trauma?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, like I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day where, you know, she was essentially telling me that she finds, a lot of resistance to praying right now. She just can't bring herself to pray. And I said, let me guess, residual Mormon trauma of, having been forced to pray in a certain way and having it not work and all those things. And, essentially she said, yeah, that's exactly it. So yeah, no, I totally get it. In fact, a lot of what we experience here in Utah, especially when people come to ceremony, is people deconstructing their religious trauma and their religious experience. And also, if I may, Mo, I mean, again, I'll foot stomp this idea that like, I don't want to. I don't want anybody to just like, blindly believe anything I say. Like that's the irony, right? Like you and I both,
Yes,
yeah, like
you
you
got to
did
do
it
your own research and find what resonates with you.
precisely.
Because
And
there's
that's
a
one
ton of there's as much misinformation out there as there is information. We live in the day of information and misinformation.
exactly.
You know.
Well said. And the thing that like to me, I think that that's actually been a benefit for me though, because when I got into, when I was told, hey, you're a shaman, you just don't remember, and me going like, I don't even know what a shaman is. Well, ultimately, when I started to consider that it might be real, I had this deliberate like moment where I was like, okay, I'm not, and my window is doing this weird thing where I keep getting bleached out, but so
I can
sorry
see.
about that. Maybe I need to turn it like this. Um, but yeah, I had this deliberate moment where I was like, I can't I can't blindly accept what somebody is saying to me just because they're saying it to me.
Hmm.
Like that I've already went down that road and that like really put me in a bad place with mental illness. So again, I'm telling everybody, not just you, but like the rhetorical you, like again, like don't listen to me in the same way I don't listen to others either. I take in what people say and like I really think, like you said, misinformation is as much as information. I think what we've lost in our society is critical thought, the ability
Yes.
to take something, tear it apart, put it back together, twist it inside out, see if it holds water or not. And so yeah, too many people are not doing it. So again, I'll reemphasize, do your own thinking, but I'll also say that like e- just that like it is, I think, really super important that people come to their own conclusions and work out, what works for them philosophically or spiritually and what doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. And something you said just reminded me of something too. So it was the your friend that has the trouble praying,
Yeah.
and from the Southern Baptist side of it, is one of the hardest ones for me to break was that it's and then they pound it into you from the time you're old enough to understand is you're just this inherently wicked and evil person, and that was something that I really struggled with. And then there's you hear about all these people who have, I call it the big religious experience. Oh, God spoke to me. Well, here I was, 30 something years old, and I've never heard, never had, seemed like I had a prayer answered, and it seemed like nobody was listening. And it's just got to the point, it's like, at what point do you just keep believing just, just because that's what you were taught?
Yeah.
It's,
A- And so, yeah, I actually kind of lost my train of thought on that, but you brought me back because in addition to like not not believing anything I say, the other thing I want people to really understand, and maybe it's too late, maybe you already made up your mind, audience, but I don't I don't have an axe to grind against religion. I really don't. I'm not anti-religion. Right. So let me just do it this way. Like down here at this base level, right, is atheism. I don't believe in God. Above that, we have agnosticism, which is there may be a God, there may not be a God. Kind of like I'm not gonna, I'm gonna hedge my bets, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have one foot in the God camp. I'm gonna have one foot in the there is no God camp. Then to me, there's, religious people who I believe in God, but I'm going to use a proxy to interact with him.
Hmm.
Like a holy man, whoever invented this religion, whoever my local person, that I go to and pay money to intercede with me. Then there's spirituality above that, which is I believe in God and I have my own relationship with him directly.
Hmm.
And this is where it gets, and this is actually, I don't know how long we've been going here, but like me coming back to answer the question, like the questions about heaven and hell and whether or not your soul is inherently good or evil. And then when you finally get above spirituality is really what we have is, which is transcendence, which is like you said, you began to see when you were doing psychedelics the oneness of everything, how connected you were to everybody, particularly your family. And that's another huge teaching within the Buddha's teaching is that, the oneness of all, like of everything. And so to me, like it's a gradient where we can move anywhere we want on that. But I think ideally we're all moving towards all of our souls are, and maybe not in this incarnation, it doesn't feel like that, but moving towards that transcendent moment where we realize that we are God. And by that I mean like the metaphor that again is pretty prevalent in Buddhist tradition, and the one that I like is that we are the drop from the ocean and the ocean within the drop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so like quite literally, we are, an extension of God.
And that's kind of where I find myself at now, or that's where I'm at. And oh, there was something in there, and I've already forgot it.
Yeah, it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think that a lot of people might find that completely sacrilege or blasphemy to say that we're God, but really, truthfully, you know, even like Christ quite literally said it as well, right? The kingdom of God is within you, and I and the Father are one. All the things they
Yeah.
all just point there. You just have to have a little bit of like an open mind to be able to, to see that what he was saying was pointing in that direction anyway.
I remember. So as actually I was watching a video today on it, and so the guy that was doing the video, they took a trip overseas, and on the tour, the guy had mentioned, hey, this is, the temple. It was a Buddhist deal, and he had made the comment that a lot of the kid, like I guess it would be the Gen Z, if you want to break it down like that, Gen Z age kids are just not doing it over there. And the whole point of his video was, I thought this was just an American thing, because that's a big thing over here. Is that age group is just not wanting to have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And so he was surprised that it was more than just here in America. It's, it is all over. And it does kind of seem like that. The younger generations, I think, are going to be the ones to kind of walk away from because religion and spirituality are, like you said, two different,
Mhm.
completely different things.
Completely. Yeah. And I think that they are embracing spirituality. And if I may, can I elaborate on that too and just give you some
Absolutely.
thoughts? So so my belief is that, everything in the universe is energy.
Hmm.
And energy is displayed in a sine wave, right?
Hmm.
A pattern. And all these sine waves are patterns. And so it's predictable. Like, there'll every crest of the ascent line will happen at a specific interval, and the same with the descent and and so in many respects we can look at those patterns as um especially if we think of it in a linear way, which time is not linear, but that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
But but if we were to stretch it out on a timeline, we can predict when certain events are going to happen. And and I know this is a long answer, so bear with me. And then the second part of this is that there's this real um phenomenon in the universe where the universe is a mirror. The mirror reflects back at us what's going on inside of us. Okay. But that not only happens on an individual level, but it also happens on a collective level. That is what we call the collective consciousness, right? And so, I mean, I'm 56 years old, and I can tell you that for pretty much all of my life, there has been this running thread of, oh, we're in the last days, we're in the end of times, Armageddon's real, the rapture is real, like whatever you want to call it. When I was more pagan, we called it Ragnarok in the Norse tradition. All these traditions have all of these predictions about the end of times. And so if we take into account that history repeats itself because it's energy and it can be displayed in a pattern, and we're moving closer and closer and closer to those cataclysmic type events. And then additionally, the ability to manifest anything in our reality, especially if everybody gets behind it. And then we've been telling ourselves the same stories for 5 decades about the end of times, then the universe has no choice but then to give it back to us.
Hmm.
And I believe that a lot of the youth that are coming into the world at this time are here to really break the system. They're rejecting university, they're rejecting religion, they're rejecting politics, they're rejecting every institution that
All of it.
yeah, that brought us to this place. And I think it triggers a lot of guys in our space, right? Like guys who military, we fought for this, we fought for these institutions, we fought for this way of life. And now it's like somebody, it's almost like we fought to keep this beautifully running, you know, whatever, like 69 Corvette in pristine condition, and it's just so beautiful. And the moment we turned our backs, somebody dumped sand in the oil. And I think it's freaking guys out. But what I believe is that no, like this is actually going according to plan. They're here to break all the institutions because, and this is, and again, like I know how much like hatred this is going to get me from the right and from the hardcore special operations communities and things like that, and that's fine. Um, but I think that like one of the ways that I look at it, and this is coming, like it's also pertinent to the earlier conversation about God and our belief system is that this world really is a matrix. And I can explain that kind of in three different, multiple different levels, but at least on one level, it's the idea that anything that man makes up is part of the matrix. So I like to really kind of ground my philosophy and my belief into the 13 laws of the universe. You can Google
Hmm.
that like in another, like offline, but so like take morality for example. Like I kind of don't well, I'm softening it right now to, not get too much hate, but I don't believe in morality. And people will be like, "What on earth are you saying?" Like that sounds like the most evil, sinful, like whatever label you want to put on it, right? And then I'm like, well, the reason I don't believe in morality is because it's subjective based on who you are and where you are. And I'll
Yes.
give you go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just agreeing with you. Yes.
Yeah. So for example, if I said to you, do you think it's, do you think it's moral of me to kill my child? Most people, almost unanimously, especially in the Western world and in our context, are immediately going to respond with, that's absolutely immoral. And then I say, well, okay, from my time in Afghanistan, what I can tell you is that if I'm a tribal chief, tribal elder, and let's say I have a couple of, let's say I have approximately 100 people that are in my family and my extended family and kind of in my, my care, let's say, I'm responsible for their well-being in this tiny little valley. And my child is caught sleeping with, committing adultery. It's on me to kill her or else everybody dies. So the most moral decision that that man can make at that time and place to protect everybody else is to commit a mercy killing. We saw them, we experienced that, we're aware of it. And so morality is really rather subjective based on who and where you are. But what's not subjective is the laws of the universe. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, I think a lot of these institutions, whether it be politics, so like politics, man made, borders, man made, money, man made, time, man made, morality, man made. Um, I think that that generation is actually expressly being born into bodies and coming here to earth at this time and place in order to be the sand in the oil that causes the systems to break.
And me and a friend were talking about basically the same thing the other day. And, for us, we were talking about, and it started with, the whole, the end is nigh
Yeah.
mindset, and it's that, you got the older age groups is all I'm going to say. The older age groups who were raised thinking that any day now, this isn't going to be their problem, essentially, because they're not going to be here to see all of it.
Yep.
And so they have taken for themselves and not even with no concern for future generations because it's not going to be our problem anymore.
Yeah.
And that was how we got on the subject of, you know, this, I guess mine and the next generation after me aren't here to fix it. We're here to tear it down.
Mhm.
We were talking about that, because you got all these old politicians in. It's like wait until the folks our age are older, are finally able to make these decisions. It ain't going to be fixing it. It's going to be tearing it down. And I like to think it'll be better, but it won't be systems that we're
Mhm.
building. It'll be ways of life. More going back to community, taking care of each other mindset.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, man, so spot on too. And that's really what I think that, again, like if we think of that wave pattern, which is actually kind of interesting because a wave pattern, right? Like if I clip that at where it intersects the horizontal line, when it goes up and then right before it crosses the horizontal line again, and I take those two ends and put them together, I actually create a circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the circle then is divided, like in many traditions, they have what they call the medicine wheel. It's divided in four quadrants, a circle divided in four quadrants, which is actually just, it repeats, it repeats, it repeats. The medicine wheel never ends. And so it's just a circular representation of the sine wave that also never ends. They're the same thing. And in the medicine wheel, we have in the eastern quadrant we have the new beginnings. In the south quadrant we have work and labor. In the western quadrant we have abundance and gratitude, and then the north is rest and self-care. Some of the four major themes in most medicine wheel traditions. Well, when that repeats, when that starts over, right? Like that's a death and a rebirth, a death and a rebirth between rest and then, we go back into the sun coming up and the east and new beginnings. And so to me, I think of that a lot like birth. And
Hmm.
whether we're birthing a planet or whether we're birthing civilizations or races, like our our race, Homo sapien, um, birth is horrific, right? Like I know you have children, so you've probably had the same experience I had, which is nothing in comparison to the experience our spouses had. But women being portals and bringing life into this realm. Well, when the universe is going to birth and when that cycle repeats, it's going to give birth to a whole new reality.
Hmm.
And that reality, like that birthing process, is both beautiful, miraculous, life-giving, top moment of your lifetime, yet it's also horrific, painful, and a brush with death. And so when we talk about the universe and this transition and this new world and breaking the machine, like yeah, like one thing is going to go, come to an end and another thing is going to begin, and that birthing process, that new beginning is going to be painful and difficult, um, because that's the law of the universe. That's the nature of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah, check your list. Are
We-
we
We've
covering any
actually
of
made,
this?
we've actually made, knocked out a good chunk of it.
Nice.
And so, going back to, I'm just going back to fast forward really.
Yeah.
Talking about when all the changes that started coming about after, using the psychedelics as medicine. It was as eye opening as it was. There were also things that I did not expect, which was now I'm seeing the world with new eyes, right?
Hmm.
And now I'm depressed.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Beautiful.
So,
Yep.
and that's kind of where I have just like you, just best way to describe it is like you were saying with the waves, ups and downs. But I'm kind of at a point like the distractions are not holding my attention. Nothing, it
Yeah.
used to be big in college ball, and now it's just like, yeah, and all of the things, hobbies, all of it. Just see, it kind of seems like it's right. It's entertaining for a minute, and then it's just snap of the fingers, and it's gone.
Yeah, man. Boy, like
And that's a big thing that people don't think about happening once they go down
the
that
rabbit
road.
hole.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because, and I mean, again, the rabbit hole, where we got that experience from, right? Or that metaphor is from Alice.
Alice. Yep.
Yeah. And what did Alice, I mean, what imagery is all over Alice in Wonderland? The mushrooms, the red cap mushrooms.
Hmm.
So, yeah, dude, like this is like a really good topic, man. Thank you for introducing this and bringing this up, because I think that this is like one of the lesser spoken about topics when it comes to psychedelics and spirituality. And that, the way I would surmise it is that when you do come out of the matrix, and again, like for anybody who's like in the back of your head right now saying like why the fuck does he keep talking about this matrix, and like like I get it, you think it's a matrix. Like no, I don't think it's a matrix. Like, and I'm going to just spend just a little bit of time on this, Mo, if I can.
Oh yeah, you're good.
Yeah, like it like this earthly realm is literally a simulation. And let me really emphasize that. I mean literally a simulation. It is not real. Okay, let me explain. Glad you asked. Not you, but the audience out there. I imagine they're asking or will ask in the future. How is it a simulation? Here's a couple examples. Number one, we already covered number one. There's God's laws, the 13 laws of the universe, like karma being one of those, for example, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then we get down here with our little tiny reptilian minds. Like that's another favorite saying of mine. We are we have reptilian minds with what's Victorian age laws and space age technology. That's a fun Earth life to navigate right there. Okay, but that's a little bit of a tangent. My point is like, so one way that this Earth is a matrix is that we made up things that don't exist. Like nobody, and I mean nobody, on the other side of death is going to ask you whether you were a Republican or a Democrat. Like that language does not exist in the universe. No one's going to care. No one's going to care about your party affiliation. No one's going to care about your sexual orientation. Nobody out there cares. God does not care about that, besides your God. So that's one form that it's a matrix. Another one, this one's one of the most fascinating, and I think this has been repeated thousands of times, maybe as many as 10,000 times. If you smoke DMT, we talked about DMT. Most of the time, it comes in two forms. Most people, well, some people drink it, some people smoke it. When you
Hmm.
drink it, it goes into your blood system and takes about 6 hours to metabolize. So that's the 6 to 8 hour journey that people have. If you smoke it, and in order for DMT to work, it has to have an MAOI, which is it's an enzyme inhibitor. Well, the funny thing is when you smoke it, you have that inhibitor in your lungs. And so it instantly goes into your bloodstream, but it also burns really quick. So the journey might be 15, 20 minutes tops. But if you smoke DMT and shine a laser at a wall and you get up close to it and look at that point on the laser, every single person, like I said, in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, who have repeated this experiment have seen the exact same thing. And do you know what they see?
What?
Zeros and ones.
Really?
Yeah. Look it up. Yeah, Google it. It's fascinating. You see zeros and ones, like literally like the movie
Binary.
Matrix. Huh?
It's a binary
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's computer coding language. Like in the light on the wall. Like you'll be able to begin to see the zeros and ones that make up this simulation. That's like for real, and it's been repeated perfectly every time. No one has found a different result.
that is wild.
Yeah, so there's another example of how this world is a matrix. Um, also just the idea that whatever, like we start talking about an infinite universe. So like one of the best movies out of it, and again, Matrix, the movies, The Matrix were actually made to to try to communicate this on a broad scale. Like the
Hmm.
the two brothers that made it, that was their intent. The other movie is Everything All at Once All the Time. Like that one goes into the whole parallel universes.
Hmm.
So there's that as well. But in any case, I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole, other than to just simply say that um, this world is really just a matrix that we've created for us, that was created by God so that we could come here to learn, to gain wisdom, to gain experience in order to, and also clear our karma so that we can continue to ascend. Remember, we go from atheist to agnostic to religious to spiritual and hopefully ultimately transcendence, where we
Hmm.
are absorbed into the oneness. But somewhere along that way, like you're experiencing and like I experience as well, is what I like to call optimistic dystopianism. Dystopian, being like that's another word for like there is no meaning on earth. It's a dystopian landscape. It's
Hmm.
pointless, it's empty. Um, but that's the more common form of dystopia is the idea that it's really pessimistic, right? Like Like we're living in a
Yeah.
dystopian world with no meaning, no value, whatever. And I think that a lot of people tend to take, the negative approach on that. I like to look at it more like in an optimistic way of like, well, literally nothing matters. So, I might as well have a good lifetime. Like, of course, like, and I think this is where a lot of like really religious and Christian people want to get into arguments with people who tend to believe in dystopia, who are also maybe classified as atheists, because it's like, you know, oh, like, oh my God, you don't have a moral compass. What's keeping you from going out and murdering and raping everybody? Well,
Hmm.
first of all, you don't need religion to give you a moral compass. And second of all, karma is real, right? So when I say I have fun with it, like I'm with you, man. Like when you talk about like being into college ball, my thing used to be baseball. I was so into baseball that I went to two World Series games in 2018. I went to one at Fenway. It was that 2018 was the Red Sox versus the Dodgers. And I'm a Red Sox fan. My dad is a Dodgers fan. So I went to one game in game one at Fenway in Boston. And then I think I was in game four in LA and they won it in five. But in any case, I haven't watched a full freaking baseball game since my spiritual awakening. So I get it, man. It's like, now what do I do? Because baseball
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Like that's just another matrix game that we invented to distract ourselves from the pain of being on Earth. So, so
Hmm.
to answer your question, and sorry that my answers are sometimes so long and around
Oh
the
no, you're fine.
long way around the barn here, but like to me, like I think it's both. I think that it's kind of two things for me. Number one, it's an opportunity to recalibrate. So where I used to take a lot of pleasure in, say, like baseball and I had two Porsches at one time that I was building into race cars, all that stuff went away. Um, and now I get to seek for really way more meaningful ways to invest my time and my energy. Primarily like with trying to help other people and also finding a lot more simplicity or excuse me, a lot more joy in the simple things of life. Like one of my favorite hobbies is, just simply painting, doing something
Mhm.
creative. So there's that. There's recalibration and finding joy and meaning in other things. And then also, secondly, I think that there's an opportunity for us to, in some respects, to feel instead of feeling like, I mean, make overwhelmed that like, oh, the things that used to bring me joy no longer bring me joy. Maybe they'll look at it as like liberating, like, oh, you know what? Yeah, like I don't have to like spend all this time and effort and money investing into something as silly and pointless as, who's in the top 25. It's probably going to be Alabama anyway, right? Like that's it's rigged anyway. So now at least I can step away from it and know that it was rigged and it's, not part of my life anymore.
I like to think of it as like reptiles shed their skin. That's how I've been looking at it recently. Is just like the shedding of old skin, and obviously it's dead skin, So
Yep.
like, what does it benefit me to try to hold on to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, just to say like, yeah, I outgrew it. Um, and then I think that there's plenty really like, what I would encourage for you and is, similar to what I've had to do, which is just really learning to find pleasure in much more simple things. Like for me, it really comes down to one of two things. It's either my garden or my art studio. And like that just brings me so much joy and satisfaction and it's real, right? Because it's something that I can create. It's something that I have some control over. And it's not something that like, yeah, the society is telling me is important, you know?
Oh yeah, and that's one thing I'm actually looking forward to once I get out and I'm able to have my own place again.
Hmm.
Was that was my, everybody had a COVID hobby.
Yeah.
And honestly, so mine was the deep dive into plant medicine as well as gardening. I wanted to learn what things grow good with this, what plants are beneficial. And then I was like, oh, wait, all these weeds actually do have a good, healthy purpose for you. I wonder what
Right.
else. And then that was, the research started. And then I found the psychedelics for mental disorder, mental, I hate to use the word mental disorders, but
Yeah, mental
mental,
health,
mental,
mental
mental
wellness.
illness. We'll just
Yeah.
call it that. Because, it's part of being sick is part of life, and even your head can get sick.
Yep. 100%. No,
Just
I appreciate
the
you saying
medicine
that.
for it now is, questionable in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, there's people in, obviously a lot of people in my circle who want to just say PTS. They're afraid to say the D on disorder because somehow, I guess if we don't say the D, it makes it
Less
less.
of a stigma.
Yeah. I mean, it makes
Yeah,
it less stigma, but it doesn't change how it's showing up in our lives.
yeah, oh yeah,
Like it's still there. It's still a disorder. Um, so I mean, I guess I get why they do that, but to me, like I also feel like there's just also some freedom in owning it, you know? Um,
yes,
for sure that was the case with me. I think that every time that I was just like, well, actually I can say it more resolutely where I can say like when I was in denial that I had PTSD and hiding it from everybody is when it had the most control and power over me. When I was finally able to say, "Oh, I'm fucked up, man. I got like some real serious mental health issues going on," and be honest with my family, with my parents, with the woman I was dating at the time, who's now my wife, all of those things. That's when it began to, when I felt empowered and had the power to take control of it versus like, you know, being shamed into like hiding over it.
absolutely. And that's it was very similar with me, and that was one of the, I guess, the few things that I'm thankful for that I came back in is because I was able to get, you know, in with a good therapist, and she
Yeah.
has helped me, immensely through all of this. Just she doesn't really do, like what you take, think a typical therapist. Oh, it's all of this and that and very by the book. She's just very chill, and she's like, I tell her my issues. Like the one I'm struggling with the most right now is a lot of old resentment and that's turning into anger. It's kind of almost like Star Wars. Hate leads to anger. And so I told her this week, hey, look, I know I've been kind of slacking off on things I need to work on, but we really got to hammer this stuff. Like we
Mhm.
need to not be chill, and we need to focus on this because it is affecting other areas. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. Good point. I want to elaborate on that too, if I may.
Absolutely.
I in the same way, like this is me stomping my fist on the table again. A, these are just my opinions. B, I'm not grinding any axes against religion. And C, I'm not grinding any axes against talk therapy. I will say, however, though, that like one thing that has been shown is that when we just talk about our problems repetitively, that frequent association can be also somewhat detrimental. Um, but I also conversely believe that it really is like I don't believe psychedelics to be a magic bullet, a silver bullet,
Mm-mm.
a one size. Yeah, it's not a one size fits all. Like that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make out there about psychedelics is thinking like it was actually the mistake I made going into psychedelics was saying like, oh yeah, God, like as soon as I drink this medicine, my problems will be solved. I won't go back to jail. I won't have a temper. I can get on with my, my golf game and my, my race car building. And like, oh my God, could I have been more wrong? Um, well, I tell everybody the ceremony is not the finish line, it is the starting line, and you got to go to work.
Yes, it is.
But part of that work and what I love about like the point you're making is that yeah, I still go to therapy. I still go to a marriage counselor. Like it takes to me like it takes every tool in the tool bag to maintain my mental health, and I'm going to use all of them because because why not really, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is spot on with the starting point because that's how I came into it too. Oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to come out and I'm going to be everything's going to be fine.
Yep.
I'll be healed, so to speak.
Well, and that's a leftover from the pharma, right? Like we expect
Yeah.
that, oh, like I can take this pill and it's like a gumball machine. If I put the quarter in and twist the knob, like the gumball is going to fall out. And that's absolutely not it at all.
And I will say too, one thing that it did do though is I hate, let's see, how do I word this right? I was able to see things that I needed to work on more clearly.
Hmm.
It almost took the blinders off, so to speak. Like I was like, okay, I need to work on these things, and that's kind of where I've been at as much as I can be with the present circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think you're right, man. I completely think you're right. One of my mentors down in Columbia taught me this phrase that she would say it every time, I would bring someone there, or does when I take people down to Columbia. um, she'll meet with them before we go into ceremony, the shaman there, and she will tell them like very, like just like she speaks so soft spoken, so sincerely, so humbly, and but her soft spoken approach and the way that she says this is like, driving a dagger through your heart. It's that on point, it's that pertinent. And she's just like, the medicine is going to show you yourself.
Hmm.
And like it just gives me chills thinking about it. Like, sometimes people will tell me, oh, I thought about doing ayahuasca, I thought about doing mushrooms, but I'm afraid of what'll happen. I'm like, bro, you're just going to look at yourself in the mirror. Like that's really what this is. Like whatever you're afraid of, you built it, you put it in your subconscious, you're already familiar with it. You might as well release it and let it out of the dungeon that you think you're hiding it in.
Yeah, but for a lot of people though, that's the biggest fear. Is having an honest look at themselves. There's no blinders or it's just raw and it's you.
Yeah. 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 And I actually think that it's probably one of the best parts of doing psychedelic medicine is the raw, unfiltered look into your soul that, I think that like most people going through this human experience, I think it's hard to not think about things like the topics we've been talking about: heaven, hell, good versus evil, the universe, religion, spirituality, and our souls in context of all of that, right?
Hmm.
And if we're and so it's almost universal, or it's imaginable that it's universal, that we've all spent time contemplating, our soul. I always was raised with the idea that, there's three versions of us. There's the version of us that we see, there's
Hmm.
the version that other people see, and then there's the real version of us, right?
Yep.
And that's right there. That's exactly what psychedelics will show you. They'll show you your real self in a heartbeat.
It rips that mask right off.
Yeah. And if you do it with ayahuasca, it's a violent ripping. Like that Band-Aid gets Yeah, that Band-Aid gets ripped off hard. You've only done psilocybin, is that right?
So far.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think so. One thing I think we need to talk on too, and this will go back to my not so good experience with it, and it ties in perfectly with looking at yourself. Is so what happened with that, right? So let's see, we did about 4 to 5 grams. We made tea,
mhm.
and we drank it, and my buddy was like, "Hey, I got some weed. You want to smoke?" And I had up until this point I had never mixed, with anything. And I was like, "Ah, I'll just have, just one hit." Well, turned into 3 hits, and the stuff he was smoking was pretty stout.
Yeah.
And it started off really cool. It was a lightning storm was coming in. My the visuals were pretty crazy. It was beautiful. And I go in, fast forward, he's gone, and I kind of went into a panic, but I tried to breathe and collect myself. But what it was that sent me off the deep end was I was outside peeing,
Hmm.
and I saw my shadow,
Mm.
and I remember thinking, "Oh, look at that guy over there." I was like, "I'm gonna wave at him, and if he waves back, then I need to be worried." So I waved, not even thinking it's my shadow, and the arm starts waving. I was like, "Oh shit!" And so I go inside, and my dog, a whole nother topic, but I swear they know whenever you're
Oh,
in
they,
it.
yeah, they totally do. Yeah.
And he was right there with me, and I just got under the covers, and eventually I fell asleep. And but the dreams that I had was crazy. It was just the shadow people just coming at me, and I never really unpacked it, until here recently. But what I think, and this is perfect, you're just looking at yourself, and it was all of the things that I had stuffed down, and not dealt with. And it's, oh, I'll deal with it later, or this will help me deal with it and I'll be fine. It was all of the trauma and things that I just hadn't dealt with, I think, surfacing all at once in that way.
Yeah, so much to touch on there. So first of all, yeah, there's a lot of good information out there when you're going to mix it. I'm not for or against mixing. It just kind of depends again on well, always every psychedelic journey should take into account set and setting.
Set and setting.
Yep, set and setting. For those that don't know, for the uninitiated, set is like your dose and your mindset and your trip sitter, and setting is kind of like your, like where you're doing it and things like that, safety protocols. In the military, we used to do a risk matrix to mitigate risk. Like would say, okay, this activity based on, what we're doing, it's high risk. In order to get that down to, moderate risk, we're going to do the following things. And so that's how I see set and setting. It's like, what can we
Mm-hmm.
do to mitigate these risks and get them down lower? Um, the the dog part of that, like I did a ceremony for a really good friend of mine who has a service animal, and that service animal is well, it's since passed, but at the time was a massive German Shepherd. And
Mm-hmm.
like the German Shepherd never was ever aggressive towards me, but he would be heightened if and always stay between me and my friend, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so my friend is like, first of all, he didn't want to go to a group session, a group ceremony because of that, so he wanted to do a private ceremony. And he said, he says, I don't really think this is going to work. His dog's name was Raider. He says, I don't really think this is going to work with Raider. Raider's too protective. And dude, that dog walked in, sniffed what I had, did a walked around me in a circle and went over and laid down and went to sleep. And my friend was like, I don't know what's happening. This has never happened before. And and in my as long as I've had this service animal, like he's never slept when there's been another, person around me. But then we went into ceremony and like the dog slept through the whole thing, man. And then yeah, just like in terms of like the shadow people and things like that. The other thing I like to tell people is like it, it is really important for you to also know that this too shall pass, right?
Hmm.
Um like every cell so every and that's really the only thing too, like that it's both a kind of a warning and a I guess a good news too, and that is like if the warning part is like once you take it, just know like the only thing that it's going to get that out of your system is time. There's nothing you can do really to speed it up. I think sometimes you can eat a little bit, eat and drink, and you're kind of adding more for your body to metabolize, and so it's got to, you know, divide and conquer. So it's got to work on metabolizing food now. So it may speed it up a little bit in that way, but there's really not a lot you can do. So be warned about that. Plan appropriately. Give yourself, a full 6 hours maybe and a buffer. But then also know too that it's kind of the good news story too. So if you get into a dark place, know that this too shall pass, and you got to ride the roller coaster.
Eventually, you'll get sleepy.
Yeah.
That's what it was for me. I said, eventually, I'm going to fall asleep. I was in my bed under the covers. The dog, he was right there above the covers, but right there with me. And that was it. It was just, oof. Eventually, I remember specifically, eventually, I'm going to fall asleep. Eventually, and I just kept saying that. Eventually, I'll fall asleep.
Yep. Yep.
And I did. And then I had the nightmares. But eventually, I woke up
Yeah.
and it was still been a beneficial experience. Like I said, I was looking back, even though I didn't do it immediately. Looking back, I was able to identify. I think this was that.
Yeah, I have another mentor. I have about four formal mentors that I have studied with, like on a real deep formal way. And one of those, he taught me, and at first I really struggled to believe it, but he taught me that every ceremony is perfect. Now, there is a difference between, doing it with a friend and a ceremony, but for the purposes of this illustration, I'm going to consider that a ceremony too.
Hmm.
But he says that every ceremony is perfect, and I'm like, no, I've been involved in some that would be classified as less than perfect. And he's like, no, Matt, like literally every ceremony is perfect. And over time, I've really come to see and believe his his point because um if we go into a ceremony with prayer, with intention, um, with our guides, we ask for protection, we pray that only love and light exists in the ceremony, and we prioritize safety, then under those circumstances, we still confront dangerous things, or not dangerous, but difficult things.
Hmm.
We're still gonna, yeah, like that's kind of the point. Like we said, we're gonna look at our souls, right? And we may not always like what we see, but it will always, at the end, it'll always turn out for our best good, our best interest. And because,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I love hearing you say that. I appreciate that in hindsight and when the dust settled, and that's the other thing I tell people too. Like, don't expect to make sense of it the next morning. Like that's almost impossible, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah. I remember after the first big one, I called you and I was like, trying. I was trying, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hopefully I told you what I still tell people, which is like do a lot of journaling over the next
Hmm.
30 days and just let the dust settle. I look at it like a snow globe, really. And it's like there's parts of our brain that have been dormant for so long. And then we take that snow globe and turn it upside down and shake it. And then all that snow needs to settle. again, and then we can look at that landscape and go, oh, okay, okay. Yeah,
I
that was
think you said that
obscure.
verbatim.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I'm glad I said it. Yeah. Perfect.
Let's see. We are almost done with the list.
All right, good.
So, really, the one is the struggles I had coming back into, I guess, the military and that setting
Mhm.
after doing all of this has been, because I thought, oh, I've done this before. I was, in the Marines, the Army ain't going to be nothing. And little did I realize, not only was it a culture shock, it was getting back into another system
Mm,
after I've been working to break from all of these systems.
yeah.
And it's been crazy. And I think that has also had a lot to do with the depression but, you know, time is limited. They can't stop time. And I did get an injury this time. So it wasn't my call to get out. I was still going to try for 20.
Mm,
But everything happens for a reason. But man, coming back has been as much of a lesson as it has been a struggle too.
yeah. Boy, I can imagine, dude. Like I yeah, so first of all, let me just say my hat's off to you. Much respect to you for going back into an institution after having had a spiritual awakening process and seeing that they, like you said, like they are just these man-made institutions and whatnot. I don't know that I could, like, if I knew what I knew now, and as I was a 20-year-old man and I was contemplating the military, I don't think I could do it. Like one gentleman that I used to know in this space, I mean, he he's an interesting character. Let's just leave it at that. But he told me that was like his whole goal in life as a young man was to, join the Marine Corps, become a sniper, and then he did LSD and like that ended it for him. I believe that. I mean, he tells some other interesting stories. I don't know if I believe everything he says, but that one I definitely believe. I could see how like my path would have been changed if I had done psychedelics. And that actually was a point that I wanted to bring up earlier in the conversation is would you agree with me when I say um the whole reason that psychedelics are illegal is because they don't want people seeing what you have seen?
1,000 times yes. A million times yes.
Yeah.
Uh, I had this conversation a lot. If the reason they're illegal, I think, is because people would see through the BS.
Yeah. I think that that's the most important thing we've said in the past hour and a half, dude, is that like that's the real truth of it is that like the what's so funny about this is that a scheduled one narcotic has to be 3 for 3 on the following criteria to be schedule one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has to be addictive, it has to
Yep.
be fatal in certain doses, and it has to have zero medicinal value. So
It doesn't tick any of those boxes.
the only one that ticks one box is cannabis. Cannabis can be addictive, especially for younger minds, developing minds, like brains. Like if you're, like I really don't encourage anybody under the age of 25 to use cannabis. I know most people, a lot of people do, but until that prefrontal cortex is fully developed, I wouldn't do it. But cannabis can be addictive. I'm, you're, I'm preaching to the choir here.
Mm-hmm.
But um, yeah, I honestly don't, yeah, the rest of them, ayahuasca, acacia, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, San Pedro, or, Wachuma, whichever you want to call it, which is the active ingredient, mescaline, same as in peyote,
Mm-hmm.
DMT, none of them check any of the boxes. Not one.
No.
Yeah. Like it's almost like the most hilarious thing. Like I saw this one time, a man that was getting arraigned. He posted like on his social media, he was being arraigned for having been in possession of DMT, which again is in our bodies and in a
Hmm.
lot of plant and animal bodies. And he goes to the courthouse for that arraignment, and there's an acacia tree growing in the garden in front of the courthouse. And acacia is one of the biggest suppliers of,
That's the one with the pods, isn't it?
yeah, the yellow one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The only reason that the government really doesn't want you to have, I mean, it started off as a racial thing, particularly around cannabis. Like Nixon's the one that started the war
The
on,
war on drugs.
yeah,
Yep.
and the drug czar, which I always thought was the most bizarre title ever.
Mm.
But okay, so like his I think it was his chief of staff that worked in the White House with him, went on record saying that, oh yeah, we created the whole war on drugs because the one thing that was in common in the two communities that were both, a giant thorn in his side, being the minority community and the counterculture or hippie community, the one thing that those two communities had in common was cannabis. And
Hmm.
so he created he created a solution to solve that problem and made it illegal and a drug war and a drug czar. And so it started as racially motivated, but then it just grew, like everything else in these institutions, mission creep. And the next thing you know, like, yeah, all these other things that hold medicinal value, who are safe, who are non-addictive. Now you understand, well, then why did we include those? Because they don't want you to see behind the curtain.
Exactly. And if they're so dangerous, then, and this was always one of my big ones, if it's so dangerous, and life threatening to us,
Mhm.
how did the human race not die off eons ago? Because like we've been using this stuff literally as long back as you can look at recorded history.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And it comes down to if Al Capone had been a fan of psilocybin rather than alcohol, would have alcohol store or excuse me, would have psilocybin stores, not alcohol stores. But when prohibition happened, like the alcohol lobbyists and mobsters and everything, were the prevailed. And so like alcohol is the most dangerous drug out there by far.
absolutely. And this was one thing we always used to talk about in the law enforcement world. I would rather deal with someone who's stoned 100 out of 100 calls rather than deal with someone who's drunk.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing I got to worry about the stoned guy doing is murdering a bag of chips. This
Yep.
guy, that's drinking, well, he may murder, a whole car
Mhm.
full of people, or his spouse.
Yeah.
There's so many things that come from drinking, domestic violence. Just the list is endless.
Yeah, I think I read a statistic that said that the number one um, like extenuating circumstance in alcohol related deaths is that, or in gun deaths is alcohol, right?
Hmm.
And so statistically, if you're going to be um, shot, the highest probability way that that would ever happen to a person is at a family gathering where there's alcohol involved. So keep that in mind as we go into the Thanksgiving and Christmas season.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's freaking sad, but and like you said, man, like like the big like you're so right. Like that's my biggest downfall in life is after I've had a little bit of weed, like I just want to tear apart like whatever horrible, unhealthy food I can get my hands on, you know?
Pizza for me.
Yeah, pizza, I chips, Yeah, what else? I love cereal. That was actually going to be the name of my podcast. I was going to call it Wheaties, but not like Wheaties, the cereal. I was going to, parody that and call it Wheaties, like Wheaties. And I was going to smoke weed and like review it like on that Hot Ones show where they eat the hot wings,
Yeah,
and then switch like after smoking and reviewing it, like switch to like the cereal of the day and review it because I can destroy a bowl of cereal on weed, man.
that's hilarious.
Yeah. What other questions you got, Mo?
We're down to the last one on the list, and
Okay,
this one might be edit this an off topic conversation.
sure.
Uh, and it's just something that's come out of this has been a desire to help people navigate all of this.
Yeah. Great topic, man. Great question. You know,
Specifically in the veteran community, with all the stuff that we have packed.
yeah. Well,
But pretty much everybody though.
I'll tell you that like I think it's going to shift for you when you're out, right?
Hmm.
And they can't harm you anymore by taking away your retirement or things. But the way I like to describe it, and this is one of the reasons why I love my garden, because I feel like my garden teaches me certain lessons shamanically, right? Like I just picked about 10 gallons, two 5 gallon buckets worth of grapes. It's my first year of harvesting. I planted them like 3 years ago. They're finally producing. I'm so excited. I got those. But the lesson there for me was, and this has been a reoccurring lesson, like I will invest. I can tell you this one guy. I got this one guy. I've invested years in this dude. And that's not said with resentment. I'm just,
Hmm.
just for storytelling. I've invested years in this guy, like going to coffee with him once a month, and he just can't quite seem to pull the trigger on a ceremony, even though he knows he needs it and wants it.
Hmm.
Um, and and what the universe has said to me and what the universe has taught me is that my role is to invite. My role is to simply be um somebody that others can come to ask questions, particularly those that have known me for a long time, right? Like you went out on a limb and trusted a stranger on the internet, but for a lot of guys, that I know, they're like, okay, well, I know I've known Matt, whatever, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And he's been a solid dude that amount of time. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna listen to what he's saying about this maybe and give him, give it a little bit of time and see. So there's that. Like number one, I'm an inviter. And
Hmm.
I try to walk a fine line between um like inviting with sincerity and humility and not being spammy. I don't want to blow
Hmm.
people's inboxes up like, hey, we're doing another ceremony. um I guess at this point I kind of figure people know, they know what I'm about and they know where to find me. So there's that. Just kind of keep it, well, so two things so far. Number one, it'll shift for you when you're out. Number two, your role is, I believe, I'll share with you, just think of your role as just that inviter. And then the
Hmm.
third thing too is I think that I would I would love to. I almost started this. I kind of reserved the Facebook page, but I didn't do anything with it. But I called it like the 222 project to use like sacred numerology. And it would
Hmm.
be the idea that you do 2 grams with two uninitiated friends who've never done it on
Hmm.
the second week of the month or something. And then we share our stories. And what I mean by that though is like when you're out, you can be a little bit more, proactive. Like you'll see if you just like maybe set a thing for Google alerts on your news feed, where like send me anything about psychedelics plus military type of thing. And you'll start to see where the VA is embracing it. You'll start to see
Hmm.
where, certain institutions are studying it and things like that. Casually, throw that out into social media. And then just like you, where you were like, when you finally felt like, okay, like I I see where this is popping up. I have questions. I know Mo, so I'm gonna go ahead and reach out to him and see if he's willing to talk to me. Because why is he posting this? I wonder if he has knowledge. Like that'll kind of open that door where people who feel safe with you are willing to reach out to you and ask questions. And then at that point, you know, um, there's all sorts of directions that can go, like how to, resources, uh, information, how to find safe providers, how to find safe ceremonies, um, the recommendations like, set and setting, trip
Hmm.
sitters, all the things. Yeah, you just begin to share your wisdom. And that I think is actually kind of comes back to like how do we find meaning in life again? And again, I think that that's one of it is like, like actually working towards something that really, has tangible results and helps people.
And that's one of the things too. I know it'll come with me being out because it's just very much you know how it is. It's like being in a cage,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't know, man. That was in hindsight. I have no clue what I was thinking coming back in.
Well, yeah, but like you said,
But
benefit.
it was definitely it's definitely good to provide for a family. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was one of the major motivators for me joining, way back when I did. I mean, my father had lost his job and struggled, pretty extensively through my teen years. And I remember thinking to myself, what's one job where you don't get fired?
yep.
That says a lot about the institution right there. We don't fire people.
You got to do a lot to get fired.
You got to work hard at it, man. You got to work real hard at it. Yeah. Well,
Oh,
I hope this is, unless there's anything else, Mo, I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope that, you know, um, I gave you at least some breadcrumbs to chew on, to nibble on, and to um, work with uh, over over the next couple weeks or whatever.
absolutely. And I do, if you have time, like maybe 10 minutes or so, I want to talk with you after this.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll stop recording now and then